Hi there everybody, Richard Rowe from True North Service Management. Hope you're well and thank you for watching this video. This is part 2 of a series. Now the first one I was just giving some hints and tips about considerations when setting up a virtual server in Azure. So the next few videos I'm going to record are going to be based around creating those virtual machines. Now this one, I'm going to create a virtual machine, but this is with a view of making this a domain controller within my Azure domain. Now we can use some of the services. I think there's Azure Active Directory that you can use. Obviously that's more costly than what I'm going to show you, because what I'm predominantly creating this for is just purely for testing purposes. So I might have a piece of software and I want to have a domain controller and a Active Directory with some test dummy accounts in there just to utilize with my testing environment for the application. And so I don't really want to subscribe to something like the Azure Active Directory. I just might want to have something simple and contained. So I'm going to do this in two parts when it comes to creating the domain controller. The first one I want to show you is how to create it in Azure, and then afterwards I will do a second video, and that's actually going inside of the actual virtual server. So first of all, you simply go into the portal for Azure. There's obviously different things you can do when creating machines with Azure. You can use the PowerShell or you can use the GUI. So that's what I'm planning to do here. Just simply use the basic stuff. Now I'm not going to go into any great shakes and go into every single detail for this. As I say, it is for testing purposes, so I don't need to go all singing, all dancing, and these are things that you can probably get videos and tips from and documentation all across the internet. So just for the purpose of this one, I'm going to click on virtual machines, and then this is obviously a list of virtual machines in a grid view, so you can have a nice sort of state of seeing how everything is set up and where and why, etc. To create a virtual machine, simply click on add new machine, and then that's going to take you through a wizard step by step in how to create that virtual machine. So I've done some tips in part 1 and I'm going to utilize those for today. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to have a resource group. Now the resource group is quite important, especially when you're creating the domain, because you want to have things all contained within there, and then you can sort of bundle and keep things tight. So things like security, permissions, from a cost management perspective, it's all within that resource group. So for this, I'm going to create a new one just for demo purposes, and we will call this True North SM. So here's my resource group. So everything I create is going to go within this container here, and then I'm going to have a virtual machine name. We'll call this TN_DC. So this is going to be my domain controller. And in the first series I mentioned about cost effective. Rule number 1 is finding out the region that's more cost effective and local to you. So for me, obviously being in Europe, I found the best route. Oh, let me remove that underscore. Doesn't like that, especially if you're going to use Linux. We'll just call it DC. So I'm going to choose North Europe. And then secondly, I'm not going to go with availability options, but if you wanted to, you could create availability sets, and then you can have a high availability and have a couple of domain controllers, so any kind of like fault tolerance. If Azure doing some maintenance on that particular area, then it will see things in the same availability zone, and it may only take the one down, so you've obviously got high availability. This isn't really necessary for this demonstration. As I say, it is only for test servers, so we don't need that. You've got a series of images that you can choose from, as I mentioned in the first video, but I'm going to browse the public and private, and from within here I'm going to select a machine from the marketplace, and really I want to go for the small disk, as I demonstrated in the first video. If I go for something outside of that, then it's going to create me 128 giga drive disk drive, and then with that I'm going to have the additional costs that are associated with that, and I'm not going to have to bring it back down. I'll use Windows 2016, so I'm just future-proofing a little bit. Usually I do 212, but I must go straight to 2016. And the key thing is just to look for the thing that says small disk at the beginning, because then you know you've got a 30 gigabyte disk drive, and then you're only going to incur charges for the P2 or the E2 or the I think it's the H2, which obviously the lower rates. So I'm going to select that one. And then the other key thing there is obviously the size of the virtual machine. Now you can blow these up and down, but as you can see, if you do forget to switch off to keep costs down and it continues running, it's going to do it at whatever the rate is of the virtual machine size. The standard one that they put in, and you have to be careful because if you don't change this, then you're going to have a higher costing virtual machine than you may really need. So as you can see, the ones that are selected there by default, that's well, quite significant there, as you can see in the costs. However, I'm only going to go down. I usually use a B2S or a B1S. For a domain controller, the B1S would probably suffice, but for this demonstration, I'm just going to use the B2S, and we'll select that. Got my username and password. So obviously you want to have something strong if it's going to be there in the domain and in the cloud. So strong passwords always recommended. Again, just for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to select a number of ports. I probably only need RDP for what I'm going to do, but I'll just enable all of those. Click on next. Again, this type here, I'm going to use the premium solid state drive. However, when you're putting the machine at rest and you're not using it, then you have the ability, as I demonstrated in the first video, just to drop it down to the standard HDD, which will probably save you from £4 a month to around sort of £1.30 a month. So quite a significant saving there. We'll select that and click on next. Again, I'm not going to go in all of this through all this detail because the purpose of this is just to show you the key things that I need within this demonstration. So as I say, availability, extensions, all of that, I'm not going to cover that in this particular video. We'll jump a few through these steps. I mean, I could go straight to review and create, but just to give you a bit of a flavor, just so you can see what are the screens that you can configure as you go along. So again, some monitoring stuff there. You've got your storage accounts, and then advanced stuff like extensions. So if you wanted to add value to your particular machine, then you can click on the extensions there and add something to that particular server. And then finally, you've got the tags, which again, when you want to consolidate things and be able to group, etc., you can add tags to the resources and the groups. There is a little hyperlink there to learn more about tags, but again, for the purpose of this video, we're just going to go straight to review and create. Now, once all of those settings have been configured, it goes through a validation process, and if everything's successful, you'll get the little tick and validation passed, which is great news there. It shows you some product details, so it just shows me the cost of running this per hour. Again, as I said, when you switch things off and you shut things down, then some of these charges can be eliminated, which is something I advise for your test servers. So there's just running through all the basics just to let me know what's going on there. It's created a new resource group called True North SM. So the future videos, everything is going to go within that resource group, and that means that when it comes to, as I say, things like security and permissions and cost management, everything is contained within that group. There's my premium solid state drive, networking, all the defaults. Now that's quite key as well when it comes to the configuration. And then we're going to click on create, and what that's going to do is it's going to create me that server. Now at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on pause, and then once that's created, I will continue with the final bit of configuration that's required inside of Azure. So we're just over a minute into the deployment, and as you can see there, it's got a list of resources that it's presenting, and it's in the process of creating them. So a couple of things have been created there, and it will continue on for another few minutes. Okay, so that has completed the deployment, so just over about 3 minutes to do that, so very, very quick. I'm going to go to resource and do the final steps to configuring this before I have to go into the machine and continue the configuration. Now what's key here is, as this is going to be my domain controller, is to have a static IP. Now, one thing I learned when I was setting this up initially is I was actually going into the machine itself, doing the configuration there, as you do with physical servers, but that was obviously causing a bit of a problem then, because it's using obviously DHCP to generate. So when I was going into it, I couldn't actually log back into that system. So the key thing to do is, and this, as I say, is really key and really imperative, is that we actually do the configuration in the Azure Console, and then once we've done that, we can actually go back in and out of this machine with no problems for the future. So a couple of things we need to do here. The first one being, as I say, just to change that from a dynamic to a static address, and the way we do that is simply we go into the networking, we click on the network interface, the IP configurations, click on the machine, IP config, and as you can see here, the assignment is currently dynamic, so we need to make that static. So if we click on static, and we'll keep the IP address there for 10.0.2.4 and save that off. Now the next thing I need to do is, this is going to be the DNS server for the domain, so again I need to just make sure that gets fixed, and by doing that I need to go into the virtual networks, and then I have to click on the actual virtual network. So this was the one that got created, and then inside here to bear with me. So that just had a quick stop just to refresh my mind. So again, we go to virtual networks, click on the device, we then go to DNS servers, change the DNS server to custom, and then from here we add the DNS. So I think it was 10.0.2.4. And then, as I said, if we were doing availability and we wanted more DNS servers for like a failover, then we would just add more there. Click on save. It saves that setting. And then at this point, we have done everything that we need to for the virtual network and also for the virtual machine. As I said, it is imperative that at the console, the Azure console level, that we do these configurations for the static IP address within the console and not within the actual server. Otherwise, as I say, you're going to run into all sorts of problems. when setting up. So that's the first bit of this done. Next video I'm going to run, and we're going to go inside the server and finish off the configuration for the domain controller. So I hope that was quite useful for you, and we will see you in the next video. Bye now.